The National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS, is, in probably my words, I won't put words in Mandy's mouth, is a behemoth. It's big, it's scary, and it's here. It's been in SA for its 4th year, is about to complete, and it's, although it's been delayed a little bit, they're progressing towards full rollout for all South Australians. So it has a lot of context to sport with how it's going to be rolled out. There are ways to access it with sport, and there's ways that are probably best avoided at this stage. So just to discuss some of this, we're going to bring 3 people up. So I would like to firstly introduce you to Mandy Baxter. Mandy is the Director of Information, Linkages and Capacity Building from the National Disability Insurance Agency. My second person to bring up on stage is going to be a young man who is a para-athlete. He's a good friend of my family. So I'd like to bring up Caleb Crowden, who's a national table tennis player. Excellent. And my third panellist is going to be Luke van Kempen, who is the Metropolitan Market and Community Engagement Manager from the South Australian Cricket Association. Thank you, Luke.
Thank you. Do you want a chair, John?
Hello.
Cheers.
Okay, so I'm quite well known for winging these things, so I actually don't have any questions in front of me, but this is something that I've been talking about for a long, long time as the CEO for Inclusive Sport SA. So we've been in the NDIS now for a while. So I guess as a first point to start this off, what we're going to be doing is getting Mandy to sort of introduce herself and our other panellists as well. But Mandy, a little bit of background on yourself,
Sure.
and maybe then what is the NDIS in 2 minutes or less?
Sure.
And if not 2 minutes, maybe 2 weeks, as we were joking about earlier, but maybe just a little bit more about where sport might come into that.
Sure, no worries, John. So thanks for having me here today. So I get to work in what's called the information, linkages and capacity building part of the scheme. And I'd just like to first start with Ben, who spoke this morning, gave some real gems, I think, to us in the sense that Ben talked about that sporting needs to include people with disability. But more than that, sporting needs to be for people of all abilities and not always a segregated model. And sport has the real opportunity to connect us all. Look, there are 2 elements to the National Disability Insurance Scheme. One that many will be familiar with, and that's individual funding plans. The other part of the scheme that you may not know too much about is ILC. Did you know that there are about 460,000 people who are expected to come into the scheme and receive a plan? There's about 4.3 million people with a disability in Australia, and many of those people will not receive a plan. That's not necessarily a bad thing. ILC and its intention, it is a grants program, but it's more than that. It's really driving the agenda and the message around inclusion. The NDIS isn't meant to replace existing services, say like health or education, or even your local sporting club. The NDIS, or as well as ILC, is meant to actually complement and bring out, I guess, the best in our communities. Because we all know that we're actually connected not to systems, we're actually connected to natural networks. And ILC is really attempting to drive that agenda. How are we doing that? Like, I guess, other parts of the scheme, ILC is also slowly rolling out across Australia. And you may or may not know, just recently, there were South Australian ILC grants just announced, and there were 32 grants that were successful in that round, worth about $7 million. Those grants are really for people who do have a plan, but also those people who do not have a plan. And they are, I guess, going to be the South Australian ILC champions, really driving the message and enabling all people to be included. I've just lost my notes because they were on my tech-savvy iPhone, but that's okay, that's fine. I'll slowly, I'll wind up because John knows how much I can talk. But look, I guess, I don't think it's a challenge, but like I said before, sport connects us all, and it's not hard to be inclusive. And I guess, even though the NDIS sometimes feels and seems hard, we have this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make a real difference, and let's do it together. Cheers.
Thank you. So Mandy sort of explained that of, say, close to 5 million people with disability, or 4 million we'll go with, only 400,000, so 10% of people are going to have an individualised plan, and these plans can range from a couple of $1,000 right through to $100,000, depending on the needs of the individual. So, Caleb, you have an individual plan, and I believe you've had one for a couple of years now. How have you been able to utilise an NDIS plan to participate in a sport of your choice? Because we've just also been told that plans aren't there to replace what already exists, and sport already existed. Yeah. So how have you been able to utilise an individual plan to better participate?
So I think, like you were saying, it's not there to replace the sport, but me being a Australian table tennis player, we really looked at how we could use the supports that the NDIS granted me to not only help me with my higher levels of sport, but to really go back to the grassroots of what were the basic things that I couldn't do because I didn't have the supports that I needed. One of the kind of main examples was the fact that I relied a lot on my family to get me to and from trainings, which was okay to begin with, but towards the last probably year or so, I've been training 25 hours a week. So to rely on my family and friends to take me there, it's not a realistic thing to put on them to get them to do. So going back to the basic things of kind of having the supports to be able to hire a carer to take me to and from my trainings, that has allowed me to consistently get to my trainings itself. But what I've also managed to do was the carer that I've hired is actually another professional table tennis player who I actually use as a training partner. So we, through a lot of kind of experimenting and seeing how it all worked, we have been able to combine the need of me having to train with the fact that I needed a training partner and kind of kill two birds with one stone, I guess. And I think that, along with the fact that having someone to support me there has actually helped me develop my confidence and independence. That in itself has helped me with my sport, because it's shown me that I don't have small things like not being able to get to training doesn't actually affect me anymore, because it was the support that the NDIS has granted me that has allowed me to do that and develop the confidence to continue doing that through these sort of things. So, yeah.
Excellent. So before I jump over to Luke, the comment about killing two birds with one stone, Mandy, is that the approach of the NDIS in general? So if we're talking about not replacing systems that already exist, how do we make sure that we can kill two birds with one stone?
Sure. Okay. Look, absolutely. Just reinforcing that the scheme isn't meant to replace existing systems, if you like. And I think that Caleb really describes it well. It enables Caleb, I guess, to continue and participate in his. It acts as an enabler rather than preventing him from participating in his chosen sport, and it gives him the choice and control and the flexibility about, I guess, how he uses his plan. And in terms of, I just forgot what the saying was, killing two birds with one stone. The scheme is meant to really act in changing the way in which we view disability. It's not about giving plans to people. It's really about ensuring that all Australians, particularly those with disability, but we have to remember that 1 in 5, so we either know somebody with a disability, we have a disability, or we will in future have a disability. So the scheme, I guess, acts as a safety net for all Australians and people like Caleb to ensure that they can do the stuff that they want to do and excel in what they want to do without relying on other systems, and it enables him to do and compete in a sport that is obviously kicking big goals. No, what are you doing? You are batting big goals. So, yes.
Excellent. Now, Luke, we've spoken a little bit in the lead up to this about the role that community sport organisations and state sporting organisations can take when approaching an NDIS. So we've heard a little bit about the information leakages capacity building area. We've heard a little bit about individualised plans. Did you want to just take us on a journey of what SAC has done in disability in recent years, and then how you might see the NDIS fitting in with cricket?
Sure. I think like Paul in the last panel, we've got a fantastic CEO, also called Keith Bradshaw, who's really supportive of programs for athletes with a disability and all-inclusive programs, actually. So it's allowed us to invest not only some funds, but a lot of staff's time in the programs that we're running. So this year we set up our inaugural SACA Development Academy. That was set up out of the need to send 3 cricket teams away to the National Cricket Inclusion Championships. And the National Cricket Inclusion Championships holds categories for blind and visually impaired players, deaf and hard of hearing players, and cricketers with an intellectual disability. So rather than just, as we did for the first year of the championships, get a squad together, run them through their paces in the nets, pick a team to go away, and then cross your fingers and hope for the best. We put a pretty, strategic plan together in terms of setting up an academy that really aimed to improve our athletes as people, with the view that if we can improve them as people, then their cricket will improve. So that looked at strength and conditioning, nutrition advice, even like financial services and welfare advice, health and wellbeing. These were the other elements that we built into their cricket training programs. We currently hold the national titles for the blind and visually impaired and the deaf and hard of hearing categories in those championships, which we're really proud of. We're, I guess, using this platform as evidence to say, well, if you really invest into people rather than invest into a specific disability or just the singular in terms of cricket, you'll get better outcomes with the form of your players. So in terms of how we approach the NDIS, it's a really difficult thing because there's so many unknowns in the sector, and I'm sure a lot of people will understand that we don't know how service providers are going to make recommendations to people developing their plan on things that can be supplied to athletes to assist them with their sports. We don't know whether our athletes are going to put in their personal development plan that they play cricket and they go away on national championships, and that there's things related to that could help, as Caleb's talked about, training partners and access to venues in their plans. So I think we're still waiting for the dust to settle a little bit, but for the time being, we're going to do, I guess, the best we can at perhaps educating service providers about, how inclusive cricket can be as a sport. Our vision's to be Australia's favourite sport and a sport for all Australians. So that's something that we need to keep driving home, and we keep delivering programs like the Sport for All workshops that are delivered into our clubs and associations to promote more inclusive practices at the grassroots level. At the same time, I think we need to be working with athletes like Caleb and our own athletes, but I guess even athletes that aren't in our elite pathway yet. So they can be talking about playing cricket informally down the park, or they can be talking about being part of the Soccer Development Academy, so their service providers can actually pick up and say, all right, well, we can work out what other things that we can fund you that relate to your cricket training. So there's still a lot to be unturned, I guess, in this space, but I think it involves an approach where you're really just educating service providers and athletes about how inclusive your sport is.
Excellent. Now, we're about to ask some questions from the audience. So just if you do have a question, put your hand up and we'll try and get you in order of the microphone. But before we move there, one of the areas that Inclusive Sport SA has looked into a lot about connection back to community sport has been something called local area coordination. Now, Mandy, do you just want to give us a very brief understanding of what local area coordination is?
Yep, sure, John. The local area coordination, or LAC, function really is really about that localised, place-based service, not service provider, but support that works directly with people to develop plans, as well as their other function that some people may not be aware of is that an LAC support can also connect people who do not have a plan. You might be thinking about the NDIS and you want some information about the NDIS, then an LAC should be able to provide you with information. Some people will find that they're not eligible for the scheme or may not even want to come into the scheme, but may require some sort of soft support, so to speak. And they too are meant to support people to connect to what I call sort of like their natural networks. So, as I said, John, we are rolling out, and there have been some delays, but we're getting there. And I think Luke picks up on a really important point, and even in regards to LAC and the scheme as a whole, it's really new, and we are in a learning environment, and it's going to be big. I sometimes think, gee, I wouldn't mind working in the NDIA in about 20 years or 10 years' time to see what it's going to be like, because it is, from working from the inside out, it can be really tough, because I've always been an advocate and huge support of inclusion for all abilities, and I can see it, I can feel it, and I'm really passionate about it. And I know that sometimes it's hard work. So really, LAC is one of the biggest partners, or the most outsourced support that the NDIS, and we call them our partners for a very good reason, because they are working in partnership, but there will always still be NDIS planners too, just to confuse you. Why not?
Excellent. Do we have any questions at this stage from the audience? Any other questions? No. Emily, go ahead.
My question's probably for Mandy. So I'm Emily, I'm from Novita, but I'm not a therapist. My question is around, do you see the ILC funding to be used for individuals or participants with a plan who are unable to access adaptive sporting equipment such as a sports wheelchair? So there's a lot of inconsistencies between individuals getting some funded and not. So where do you see the ILC fitting into that?
Yep. Thanks, Emily, for your question. ILC doesn't directly fund individuals, but a core priority for ILC is about supporting people in their capacity and ensuring that they've got the information and resources that is required. So we work with organisations or community services to provide that. Equipment is a tricky one, and I know that, look, I'll affirm with you, yes, I can see that it is sometimes a little clunky in terms of about how equipment is funded through an IFP or an individual funding plan. So in the short answer, I see ILC working with organisations about how we address that gap rather than providing direct funding to supply a wheelchair or other adaptive equipment as such.
Are sport-specific wheelchairs part of individualised plans that you've seen?
John, you're asking me a question that's almost going out of my area of expertise, so can I take that on notice and bring it back to you?
You definitely can.
Thank you, John. I work in ILC for a very good reason.
Yeah, so that was a loaded question. I do
It was.
apologise. It's one of those things, with such a new scheme, we still haven't seen how it's going to roll out, especially in South Australia for adults. And so it is something that is asked a lot, but we still haven't got a really, solid answer on that. So just quickly, local area coordination, Luke, is about maybe put words in the mouth of the local area coordinators here, but they're aggregators of community services. So what services exist in their community, how inclusive are they, and then how can the people coming to our service engage with those organisations? So Luke, in terms of community cricket and how broad that would be, I'm not sure how many cricket clubs you have and how many people volunteering in cricket associations, but how do you see that playing into a local area coordination program?
We have to ensure that our clubs are inclusive. That's the main thing, because those people won't recommend cricket as a sport if they know that the club down the road puts its hand up and says, you know, we don't accept those kinds of people because we don't know how to deal with them, and frankly it's too hard. So we've got to keep educating our clubs, we've got to keep working with our volunteers to make sure that they understand that. I really like the way that Paul and the others talked about it before. It's like, have a go at it. You know, get someone with a disability involved in your club. And there's so many great examples of different ways that people, and in this context, people with a disability, can be involved in sporting clubs. Dr. Nguyen's presentation this morning reminded me of a great example we've had with eye technology that's allowed a person who has a severe case of cerebral palsy to use that eye gazing technology to score cricket matches. So, you know, there's really good ways that you can bring people into your clubs, that you can utilise what their strengths are. And I guess we need to make sure that those local level reputations of our clubs are of a high enough standard that people and service providers are going to recommend cricket.
Excellent. Caleb, as a question for an athlete, have you come across many challenges in your sporting pathway to being included? And then what have you found is the best approach for someone who comes across young Caleb for the first time?
That's a very loaded question. But yes, I have had a lot of issues with inclusion in sports, particularly at the grassroots levels. And I think that is part of the reason you don't see a lot of people with disabilities not just getting into sport, but even reaching the elite level, because they have to get past that lack of inclusion, I guess. They have to have the desire to fight through that and do it themselves because it's something they really enjoy. To be honest, this isn't a great answer, but the way that I've kind of just gone about trying to do that, if I've been lucky enough to find one or two people inside the actual community of the sport, of the club, or wherever it is, then I stick to them like glue. Because I know that they're going to support me and help me through that. And through working with a person that you can find, it'll open up the minds of the other people around you who don't necessarily see the athlete as somebody to respect yet, but it's the person that's actually helping them, if that makes sense. And I think other ways that I've just gone about doing it is kind of trying to almost force my way into, that's a bit blunt, but really try and force my way into those communities and just get out there and do it. Because people aren't going to include you and realise that you can do it unless you get out there and show them that it can be done. Like anything's impossible until you actually find a way to do it. And I think it's great that now we have people like this, like you, who are really working towards inclusion. And I think in the future, over the next couple of years, you'll see a huge development and a massive group of people with disabilities coming into those lower levels of sport because they're really feeling included. But you'll also see a massive jump in the elite level of parasport because now they don't have to fight through that like I have. You won't hit that initial wall and be like, oh, well, I've tried, do I really want to do this? That's why you get the elite level of athletes that are really determined and very self-driven because they've had to fight through everything to actually get to where they are. So, yeah.
Excellent. Conscious of time here, you've just spoken about the future of how you see it. For both Mandy and Luke, before we wrap this up and sort of head off to the last session, what do you see the future role of sport playing in an NDIS and the role of sport in the NDIS from the other side of it?
Look, absolutely. I think sport is such a game changer, pardon the pun, in the sense that we know that it connects us all. So, I would offer up, if you're a sporting club, you're an organisation, what are the layering of your club? Who are your leaders? Disability needs to be visible. And what I mean by that is that people have to be involved at a board level, a fan level, a player level, that if your sporting club isn't reflective of that, 1 in 5 Australians who have a disability, then you're not being inclusive. And you're not actually allowing people's abilities to shine. Disability doesn't have to be... disability can be really tough. And it can be a fairly consistent fight. So I would offer up that sporting and disability has a big job to play. And you can start to see it. Gil McLaughlin just recently posted a video and he focused on all abilities, and I think that is an absolutely excellent way to go.
Yeah, from our point of view, I think Ben summed it up really well this morning when he said that his aim and the aim of a lot of people with a disability is to play in sporting clubs or compete against other athletes who don't have a disability. So for us, certainly speaking from a cricket perspective, we run acceleration programs and competitions to allow people with a disability to play amongst other people with similar disabilities. But the end game for us is to get those people, where they can, playing in community clubs and I guess integrating with people, because that's where the people, the athletes, are going to get the most satisfaction, and it's going to allow sport to enrich their lives, I guess, to the optimum. And I guess that's the way I think that sport needs to work with the NDIS or the sector in terms of continually trying to advocate about how sport enriches the lives of people in Australia and people across the world, and it can really do that as well for people with a disability.
Excellent. Thank you very much to Luke, Caleb and Mandy.
Cheers. Thank you.